remain standing as we invite Cannonbert to invoke God's presence in our event this afternoon.
Let us pray. Everlasting God, we give you thanks for your grace and for your goodness. We give you thanks for bringing us to this hour, to this event. We bring before you our nation, the people of this region, people of this Caribbean region. In Barbados, we pray for our President and Prime Minister and all members of Cabinet, all members of Parliament. We pray especially for the ministry with special responsibility for education, for the executives and administration in that ministry. We bring before you, Almighty God, the organization of the American Office, for its leadership and members of staff. We give you thanks, Almighty God, for this Barbados Community College. We pray for the chairman and members of the board, the principal, and all members of staff. We give you thanks today especially for this collaboration between the Organization of American States and the Barbados Community College as we ponder on the role of education and the transformative nature of education. We pray that your people of this region may always be enlightened with information and knowledge, that you will always produce persons who will help us to be able to define what we do in terms of our education. So we bring before you the lecturer today and all of the participants, that what we do today may be to your honor and glory, and may be down to the benefit of all of us. Be with us, O Lord, in all our doings with your most gracious favor, and further us with your continual help, that in all our works begun, continued, and ended in you, we may glorify your holy name, and by your mercy obtain everlasting life, through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen.
Thank you, Cannonbert. You may take your seats. Ambassador Fukushima, Embassy of Japan, Ambassador Jacinth Henry Martin, Advisor, Office of the Assistant Secretary General and Coordinator of the Coordinating Office for the offices and units of the General Secretariat in the member states of the Organization of American States, who will be joining us online, other members of the OAS headquarters and national offices, Mr. Leo Preville, Director, CARICOM Single Market, heads of other regional and international organizations, Dr. Ida Mae Denny, Chairperson, Board of Management of the Barbados Community College, Senior Administrative Academic and other staff of the Barbados Community College, Dr. Editha Nancy Jacobs, part-time tutor of the Barbados Community College and today's lecturer, students of the Barbados Community College, specially invited guests, members of the media, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. I am Dr. Caroline Woodruff-Holder, Acting Registrar of the Barbados Community College, and for the next hour or so, my role will be to guide proceedings for today's event. I will not call myself MC. The Inter-American Week, just a few persons are coming in, just give them a moment to sit. The Inter-American Week for People of African Descent in the Americas was established in 2018 by Permanent Council Resolution 1093. It is aimed at fostering reflection on the socio-economic issues faced by people of American descent, as well as to laud their contributions to the development of the Americas. This is the 6th year of its existence, with this year's celebrations highlighting the significance of transformative education in addressing historical injustices and promoting meaningful action towards equity and inclusion in the hemisphere. The week was launched on Monday, March the 20th, 2023 by the OAS Assistant Secretary General, Ambassador Nestor Mendez, with a ceremony at the OAS headquarters in Washington. As the respective institutions, organizations, and so on continue to recognize, reflect, and celebrate significant milestones in the lives of people of African descent, and in acknowledging the contribution of education to our development, the college is more than honored to share in this event as we too celebrate our 55th anniversary of providing quality education to persons in Barbados, the Americas, and beyond. I now invite Ambassador Joseph Henry Martin, who's joined us on the line, to provide us with a brief remarks. While we wait for Ambassador Henry Martin, I'll invite our chairperson, Dr. Ida Denny, to provide the official welcome.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ambassador Fukushima, Ambassador of Japan to Barbados, welcome to the Barbados Community College. Ambassador Henry Martin, who is joining us online from Washington and who I hope will soon have his technology ready to deliver to us. Mr. Leo Preville, Director Acting of the CARICOM Single Market here in Barbados. Ms. Erica Watson, Administrative Technician of the OAS office in Barbados. The staff of the Barbados Community College. Canon Burke, thank you for leading us in prayer. Officers of the Media Resource Department who at short notice agreed to facilitate us with the streaming of the activity. We thank you very much. Students of the Barbados Community College, other specially invited guests, members of the media.
Yeah, but I'm not on it. They've been talking to me.
Let me give you a very warm welcome to the Barbados Community College and to this lecture, Fighting Slavery's Legacy of Racism Through Transformative Education in the Americas, which is sponsored by the Organization of American States and the Barbados Community College. I want to particularly extend warmest greetings to Ms. Erica Watson of the local OAS office, as well as the other representatives of the OAS, because they work very tirelessly in getting the Ministry of Education to support activities like this. So Erica, I am glad to see you here this afternoon, and I'm glad that we were able to facilitate. Let me offer you one apology though. It is on behalf of the Chief Education Officer, who, you know, we usually say people are up to their neck in work. Well, she's up to here, all right? So if we were in water, she would have drowned by now. But she has asked me to offer her sincere apologies, and because we are having it streamed, the Media Resource Department is going to have it on record so that the chief can go in on her own time and have a look at it. I also want to thank Dr. Nancy Jacobs, who is going to deliver the lecture, for agreeing to do it. I have known Dr. Jacobs for many, many years. I noticed that in the little profile that you all have on her, that you talked about her generally and then talked about her work in Grenada and otherwise. But I know Dr. Jacobs from way back when, in the 1970s, when I used to teach at Deacon's Primary, and she used to teach at St. Leonard's Girls' School, which was part of which was located in Deacon's Farm, and she was at that section, and she was Nancy Ferguson then. One thing I will tell you about her, she is still, after all of these years, fighting slavery's legacy, because I have known her particular passion for this particular subject, and I'm not surprised that that is where she still is, even after all of those years. So Nancy, I am sure you're going to send us away with a lot of food for thought, and I look forward very eagerly to hear what you are going to be telling us after all these years. I am not going to pretend that I know this subject like Nancy Jacobs does, but I want to leave a little food for thought with you as I wrap up the welcome and we get to what Nancy is going to deliver to us. As people of the Americas, we come in different colors, different races, different cultures, etc. But we are all bound together because we are all people of this region. I believe, therefore, that we have to be in the forefront of the change that we desire in terms of fighting slavery's legacy. We have to begin treating each other well if we expect others to do so too. We are not going to succeed in slaying racism if we too engage in racist behavior towards each other, simply because we do not all look the same. When I looked at this topic, I looked at the word legacy, and it occurred to me that a legacy is something that we build up over time. So it is not easy to get rid of when it is embedded in our very thinking. And as I reflected on the topic and what Nancy could possibly tell us about it, my mind drifted back to the recently held FIFA World Cup football, when I saw some people from the Americas engaging in significant racist rants towards black players from another country. One might say, well, they were not black players from the Americas, but if you behave in that way towards black people from somewhere else, it is highly likely that you are going to engage in that kind of behavior towards black people from this region as well. And the irony of the thing to me was the player who was the recipient of all of these racist chants happens to be the teammate of our Argentina. That was where the persons came from. He happens to be the teammate in club football of Argentina's darling Messi. And I saw, since the World Cup, a football game in which both Messi and Mbappe scored and hugged one another. And I would hope that that would be a lesson to those of us who believe that because we are an opponent of somebody, that we have to behave in the kind of way in which I saw those Argentine supporters behaving towards persons of another color. I want to say that when you behave like that, you send a message to all people of that particular color that you don't value them. And if we want to value ourselves as people of this hemisphere, then we have to behave in like manner towards all of the people of the hemisphere. So I want to leave that little food for thought with you, and I want to see how Nancy is going to tell us we can help through transforming education to get rid of that kind of behavior and truly make us one people of this region. Ladies and gentlemen, I thank you for being here. I look forward to the next hour. I hope you look forward to it too, and I hope that when you leave here with something to think about in terms of how we can uplift each other. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Denny. And as always, we know that Dr. Denny will always open our appetites for whatever will come later. Ambassador Henry Martin.
Thank you. Representatives of the Ministry of Education, Technological and Vocational Training, distinguished excellencies of embassies, diplomatic missions, and directors of international and regional organizations. Dr. Ida Mae Denny, Acting Chair, Barbados Community College Board of Management. Principal of the Barbados Community College, Ms. Annette Aline. Senior Academic, Administrative, and other staff of the Barbados Community College. Technological and Vocational Training. Distinguished excellencies of embassies, diplomatic missions, and directors of international and regional distinguished lecturer, Dr. Editha Nancy Jacobs. Acting Chair, Barbados Community College Board of Management. OAS colleagues at headquarters and at our national offices across the Americas, including Ms. Erica Watson, administrative technician at our office in Barbados. Dear invited guests, faculty, students, ladies and gentlemen, I am delighted to be with you. The Organization of American States takes with the utmost seriousness its role at the vanguard of improving the lives of the people of the Americas through the strengthening of human rights, the promotion of democracy, the spurring of integral development to sustain lives and livelihoods in the hemisphere, all underpinning communities in which citizens thrive in secure environments. The scope of the organization's work is far-reaching, multidimensional, and cross-cutting, touching on all sectors and engines of economic growth, and on avenues for supporting and educating the human capital of OAS member states, including marginalized and vulnerable populations such as Afro-descendants. The Inter-American Week for People of African Descent in the Americas represents a moment of reflection on the annual calendar of the OAS during which we are called upon to be reflective about the transatlantic voyage of Africans, the legacies of slavery, and the contribution to the Americas of the descendants of those whose ingenuity and resilience underlie the aspirations and the successes of people of African descent in this hemisphere. It is central to empowering the people of the Americas to be leaders in our communities, our countries, and in the global space we all share. And it is of even more significance to populations such as Afro-descendants, who are often challenged to escape the rigors of marginalization and systemic limitation of access to avenues for economic advancement and social mobility. Today's lecture is the result of collaboration between the OAS office in Barbados and the Barbados Community College in commemoration of the 6th Inter-American Week for People of Descent in the Americas under the theme, Fighting Slavery's Legacy of Racism Through Transformative Education in the Americas. We fully recognize that education must encompass more than the transfer of knowledge in the classroom. Transformative education must foster critical thinking skills, encourage careful analysis of information, and inspire the development of skills necessary to navigate complex issues and to make informed decisions. Transformative education must help students understand their own values, biases, strengths, and weaknesses, and prioritize social justice. It should also encourage them to take action to address inequities and to promote equality and fairness. Transformative education must validate one's sense of self and position our people to assess and to make redress so that we are increasingly confident about our own capacity to innovate, to find creative solutions to our own problems, to be unabashed in the use of new technologies, and to pursue lifelong learning. Our illustrious panelist is steeped in the knowledge and the experience of educating for tomorrow, and fully cognizant of the impact of education on Afro-descendants and on the population of Barbados. Her perspectives will be a light that can inform our thoughts on the topic and certainly inspire a keen appreciation of her insights and recommendations for cementing pride in our Afro-descendant student population in Barbados. In extending thanks to Principal Aline for this important collaboration, it is my great hope that this is the start of continued engagement with the OAS, and particularly so on the Model OAS program, opportunities for internship, and scholarship offerings for advanced studies across the Americas. On behalf of Assistant Secretary General Mendez, I look forward to the lecture to be delivered in the hope that we will be edified and inspired to be catalysts for transformational learning and impactful change within our communities. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ambassador Henry Martin. We certainly appreciate your taking the time to join us today despite the distance and to provide us with remarks on this very sensitive but important topic. You have indeed added much flavor to our afternoon menu by providing further food for thought. At this time, I would like to invite our college librarian, Ms. Jillian Husbands, to invite our featured speaker this afternoon.
Thank you, Ms. Master of Ceremonies. Protocols have been established already. It is my pleasure to introduce this afternoon's speaker, Dr. Editha Gentile Nancy Ferguson Jacobs is a powerful name for an equally powerful lady. During a career spanning over 4 decades, this eminent Barbadian has assumed the roles of graduate teacher, author, historian, scholar, cultural exponent, dancer, artist, consultant, chief examiner with the Caribbean Examinations Council, and a judge at cultural festivals including Cropova. This mother of 1 daughter was a senior lecturer and a chair of the Department of Art, Culture and Humanities at the T.A. Marichaud Community College in Grenada for 7 years. Since her return to Barbados in 2012, Dr. Jacobs has taught at the University of the West Indies Cape Hill campus and the Barbados Community College. In addition, Dr. Jacobs has presented at many conferences, workshops, and lectures on themes including African and Caribbean art and culture, slavery, cultural studies, intangible heritage, indigenous religions, and art history. Of note, Dr. Jacobs has written extensively on the origins and development of the Barbados landship. As a prolific scholar, she has authored numerous publications and articles. For example, Full Steam Ahead, Locating the Barbados Landship, published in 2013, The Spiritual Baptists of Barbados 1957 to 1997, co-authored with C.M. Jacobs in 2013, The Role of Women in the British Anti-Slavery Campaign, produced in 2006, and her PhD dissertation entitled Art as a Weapon, the Manipulation of the Image of Black People in British Slavery, 1700 to 1834, and that was prepared in 2003. This lecture promises to be enlightening, so prepare yourselves to make notes and take mental note of the rich discussion and analysis therein. I now invite the lady of the hour, Dr. Jacobs, to share her knowledge with us. Dr. Jacobs, the floor is yours. Good afternoon. Thank you for being here. But I don't know if I have really the footprint for this one, because this seems to be a killer. After hearing all of the different things that have happened, and I didn't think that I really was ready, but I still thank you for being here. You're my support. I know that I have support. Even if they aren't here
physically they're here sending their light. So with all of the uplifting words by friends and colleagues and every that, we are standing on the protocol that has been already established. I start with the first aspect of understanding the major aspect of slavery's legacy of racism. And we realize that it can be changed through the introduction of a transformative educational system. The enslaved were our ancestors who were forcibly brought from West and Central Africa to the Caribbean and the Americas from as early as the 16th century. John Henry Clark mentioned in his book, Christopher Columbus and the African Holocaust, Slavery and the Rise of European Capitalism, 1993, that the African slave trade is best known because it is the best documented, but unfortunately, the least understood. The slave trade could not have started at all had there been no market for it. When the basis of the European Industrial Revolution had been established by creating embryo technology, including the gun, where they used other advantages to accommodate their expansions. Europeans created the market when they were in search for new materials, new manpower, and new lands to exploit. They also created most of the documents on the slave trade with the intent to make the victims of slavery feel guilty to vindicate the perpetrators. Many of their plans worked to their advantage, but recently they seem to have unraveled the raising of consciousness about Western colonization in Africa, and the diaspora saw the call for reparations and the return of art treasures that had been moved through aggression or agreement from the place of origin in Africa. Just last month, we looked at 1897, where the Benin bronzes were plundered and appropriated by a British expedition, and for more than 200 years were displayed in museums and private collections in Germany, Belgium, France, England, and the USA. Some countries have started to return these works of art to their original homes in Africa. And many religious institutions, newspapers, and universities who were involved in the human trade also made financial apologies. Just last month, again, a British family that owned 6 plantations in Grenada apologized for their ancestors' inhumanity to over 1,000 slaves. The Trevelyan family offered financial recourse as reparations to the country through education. The British, by the 18th century, had brushed aside all her rivals to become the foremost slave trading nation. In 1660, the formation of the Royal African Company of England under King Charles II was granted a monopoly license trading to Africa. This monopoly was to last 1,000 years. So it doesn't seem as if the time is up yet. And the charter was to supply slaves to the British West Indies from the coast of Guinea. Included amongst the shareholders were members of the royal family, Alexander Pope, John Gay, and the philosopher John Locke. This dominant position was due to the economic development stimulated by the slave trade and chattel slavery itself. During the latter half of the 18th century, the informed, educated public of England began to question the morality of the trade that contributed much to the foundation of Britain's wealth, power, and international preeminence. This questioning, supported by agitation inside and outside of Parliament between 1780 and 1833, eventually led to the abolition of the slave trade in 1808 and then full chattel slavery in 1838. It was not as simple as it appeared, as many historians of the time found the work of people like Dr. Eric Williams of Trinidad to be a thorn in their side, as they could not refute his thesis that looked at the role of economics and the dismantling of slavery that resulted in the abandonment of the West Indian colonies. To the students here of history and culture, don't ever think that all of the issues on slavery have been exhausted, as there are new events and issues being uncovered daily that researchers can delve into using new creative perspectives. The legacy of racism is described as prejudice and discrimination based on race. Racism can be an action or a practice taught, can be seen in processes, attitudes, and behavior which amount to discrimination through unwitting prejudice, ignorance, and thoughtlessness. Many people have felt that Black people were culturally inferior to whites and needed to be taught how to become civilized, and even longer still, to become equals with their teachers. I'm sure you have been exposed to information that the cradle of mankind is the continent of Africa, and that scientists have studied the mitochondrial DNA of every race, and they have been all linked to one female, an African woman from over 200,000 years ago. Hence, there is only one human race. As evidence shows that the oldest human remains have been in East Africa in the Rift Valley. Seeing is truly believing, as there was much controversy about establishing the fact that the civilization credited to the Greeks and Romans had been appropriated from Africa. The Metropolitan Museum of Art has mounted a permanent exhibition since December 2021 and still ongoing to respectfully acknowledge the African origin of civilization as theorized by Senegalese scholar and visionary Cheikh Anta Diop. Diop's lifelong dedication in establishing the facts in his groundbreaking book, The African Origin of Civilization, Myth or Reality, he had asserted that ancient Egypt was a source of subsequent development of cultural traditions in the rest of Africa and the Western world. For the very first time, this museum has presented 42 masterpieces of African art from West and Central Africa by master sculptors alongside art from ancient Egypt to illustrate some of the complex parallels at different places and times. This is one of the few so far to acknowledge the truth that our Black scholars have been teaching and preaching for generations. We also acknowledge the work of Ivan van Sertima, (1935 to 2009). He was a Guyanese scholar with his formative work called They Came Before Columbus, the African Presence in Ancient America, 1976. These scholars, who have blatantly borne the brunt of much racism, must be lifted amongst the ancestors, and we must ask forgiveness for not having courage earlier and ask for strength to fight this part of the journey. It is still a fight. It is still a fight. So as we draw near to the closure of the decade for people of African descent, it is imperative that we look at a transformative educational system in Barbados, the wider Caribbean, and the Americas. We need to approach this topic not because someone else suggested it, but because we know it is a necessity for our generations to come. We must make wise choices on what is best for us. First of the two types of transformative learning is a theory developed by Jacques Mezirow. He died at the age of 91 in 2014, an American sociologist who then branched into the area of adult continuing education. As a summary of his work, he was inspired by his wife, who had returned to complete her undergraduate education in the early 70s, where she shared her experiences with her husband, and he found them thought-provoking and the results intriguing. Mezirow and his team then undertook a massive study of adult women who returned to complete their education at community colleges in the United States. He sought to identify factors that either impeded or assisted learning, and found most of the women had undergone a personal transformation that outlined a critical change in their options, competencies, and self-confidence to go into new roles. Mezirow was influenced by an interpretive sociologist who argued that people interpret reality based on internalized sociocultural symbols. Hence, this was the means of authenticating previously learned knowledge to formulate current and future behaviors. Accordingly, Mezirow's theory was a combination of interlocking theses, as he found that in adults, learning is transformative, as at this stage they are more capable of seeing distortions in their own beliefs, feelings, and attitudes. He also argues that adults develop psychologically through a dismantling of the illusions of safety developed in childhood. Thus, transformative learning requires a conscious effort from both teacher and student to achieve this effectively. Mezirow presented his theory in 1978 as a paper, and then his complete version in his book, Transformative Dimensions of Adult Learning, in 1991. This was the first and earliest theory of transformative learning which was implemented at teachers' colleges and then spread to other locations. I will share another type of transformative educational philosophy, which I sought mainly to understand others like me, whom my elder mother, who is not here today, expresses as being uprooted and replanted. It is called Ubuntu. Ubuntu. Anybody ever heard of Ubuntu, the word before? It was developed in ancient Kemet in the year 1049 BC. So it's the oldest of any of those systems being practiced. The equivalent word Ubuntu in the ancient Egyptian language is called Ma'at. The word Ubuntu belongs to the Ngundi group of indigenous languages. It's from Bantu and can be best translated into English as humanness or being human. But it is a very difficult word to render in a Western language. There is no equivalent English term for Ubuntu, but can be interpreted as a person has Ubuntu, which means they are generous, hospitable, friendly, caring, and compassionate. Ubuntu philosophy is made up of 5 major sectors. There is a creed, body of traditions by which communities define themselves, customs, laws and other legal usages, constitutions, and principles of Ubuntu. The first step in developing the requisite theory of African Ubuntu philosophy is to recognize the school as a community, not a collection of individuals. We must look back at the mission and the motto for Barbados Community College and see how close we were. The current example of successful schools is reflected in the South African educational system, as they treat all learners equally. As the school practice the values of Ubuntu, the purpose of education is to free the mind of the oppressed, to destroy social classes, and to create one human consciousness within society where individuals acknowledge humanity in themselves and others. The whole educational process centers around Ubuntu as a philosophy or a set of ethical principles that capture the belief system of the community. The article, The Philosophy of Ubuntu in Education, by Ngozi Emmanuel Mahaye, Chief Director in the Department of Education in KwaZulu-Natal, South Africa, has been most enlightening. Mr. Mahaye argues that we teachers must pursue knowledge that can renovate African culture, defend African people's dignity and civilizational achievements, and contribute afresh to a new global agenda that can push us out of the crisis as promoted by the European Enlightenment. Eurocentric knowledge is not produced just for its own sake. Its purpose through the ages has been to enable them to know the natives, to take control of their territories, including human and material resources for their benefit. And according to Said, such control of knowledge was used to exploit the non-European peoples, colonize them both mentally and geostrategically, as well as subordinate the rest of the world to their designs and desires. When I spoke of Elder John Henry Clark, Chick Anta Diop, Ivan van Sertima, and those forgotten ones who carried this flag, I ask you to make your connections and identify with your ancestors, for healing is necessary. When we think of the Eurocentric system of education to which we were all subjected, the African is still a victim of an educational process that is causing mental deformity, which in turn is affecting his view of himself, of others, and the human world. Mahayed continues that the most damaging aspect of this system of education was that it mesmerized the African mind to the point of confusion, frustration, and helplessness, and sometimes made the African contribute unwittingly to projects aimed at his own destruction. This is who we are, Barbados. Painful, but we must face the facts. Europeans did not see the mirror image that we had of ourselves, and their influence attempted to change Africa's concept of humanity and their concept of God. Racism and xenophobia can become a thing of the past, and reminding us that Mandela had said human beings were not born racist, but what they learned from society, which means they can be taught to unlearn those traits. You know that we, at the stage of life, find that we are not really the ones that have to deal with the working of this thing called racism. We are always the ones that it works against. So I think that those kinds of educational systems need to be instituted there, and we don't mind, because we are not racist, really. We understand when people can behave a certain way towards us. But with the transformative type of education, if we were to embrace the one that is closest, I don't know to you, but I know I see which one is to me. So at this point, I always leave this adinkra symbol, which is of the Sankofa bird looking back. So it says, when you go, turn your eyes and look back and come home frequently. So I will end it there and ask you if you have any questions or any comments to make at this time. It is over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Jacobs. I'm sure that you can all agree that we had some appetizer earlier, and our main course was indeed enlightening. I'm sure that our minds have been transformed, and we are now ready to meet the role of transforming our education head on. As Dr. Jacobs invited anyone who have any questions, any comments. Is there anyone in the audience who would like to say something regarding the discussion so far? No burning questions? All right, so we have one question from Ms. Connell, or comment. Good afternoon. Thank you. Anyone else?
Dr. Jacobs, thank you very much for that very enlightening lecture to us. You know our system here at the BCC. Which areas would you think are more predisposed, perhaps, for this transformative education we talk about?
Which areas? Well, I'll use the area that I work in. I don't think I have any of the ladies here from fashion, but they were my students last semester, and we were online. And I started to have them attuned. I said, okay, we are a group. I would like all of you, you have everybody else's number and how to get in touch with them. If someone is not coming today or you're going to be late, please send the information on. Don't have to call me directly, but I just wanted them to get the idea of working together. Then we had a project to do. Everybody's doing a different project. I said, but you might come across something, if you know what your neighbor is doing, and you come across something like that, they may need it. So help them. So we are supposed to be helping each other. It is not to be some kind of competition. That's why I had sent the one with the children sitting in a circle to explain Ubuntu. So there are lots of codes, ethics, principles that we would have to learn because we need it to be able to pass it on to our children. And the difference between this Ubuntu and Meziro's theory, his was only for adults. And you know why? It was because of the system that they were exposed to, first and foremost, that they did not have the opportunities to be children, first of all. And when you are a child and you grow with these, you develop. You don't have this as a problem now to say, I didn't learn this because this was psychological. I wasn't able to cope with it. But I was glad that I did have this topic. It was new to me to think about transformative education. It was new. And that is why we had it today and not during the 20th to the 25th. It was too soon. I would not have been able to, well, I'm not even saying that I'm prepared at this stage, but I'm finding something there that we really could look at if we could come together as adults, teachers first, and then decide this is what we would like to do, and we will be able to encourage our children. I think this is a step in the right direction. I don't know if many of you understood the reasons why I put up those images of our past historians that had to go through so much racist comments, behaviors. Let's look at the book by Ivan van Sertima, They Came Before Columbus, and you see what kind of things he had to go through. They're trying to tell him, oh no, it could not have been a black person that was in Mexico. And then we learned that the Olmecs, it came back exactly, they were out of Africa. Because you could see from the heads and the helmets and so forth that were done. So I'm thanking you for your comment and so forth. So anybody else have any things to add or ask before I sit back down? Yes.
Thank you very much for your lecture. The question is, well, I'm from the CARICOM Secretariat, and we're looking at the CSME, and it is focused on the movement of Caribbean people. And one might argue that our Caribbean people were closer together, and the concept of Ubuntu
Yes.
was perhaps closer to us
Yeah.
after emancipation, during the pre-independence era,
Had to.
than now. What now needs to be done to bring back that
Well,
approach?
this is just off the top of my head right now. Thank you, Ambassador. I believe that we have to look through at what we had and see the purpose it served. It must be towards us as a people and not something as a by the way. And some of the work that I really read here recently was from South Africans, because they are practicing Ubuntu philosophy in schools, and it is working. It is working. So anyone want to go on Google Ubuntu and go back to looking at, his name was Ngozi Emmanuel Mahaye, M-A-H-A-Y-E, to see his work. Those of you who are here from community college, it is, I think, with the academia.edu, it's already there. That particular article is there, and you should be able to get it easily. So if there's anybody who is interested in the read and they can get in touch with me, and I might be able to help with some of that as well. Thank you, sir. You have a question? Yes.
Hi, good afternoon. Enlightening lecture, I never heard the term before.
Right.
And while you mentioned just now about Googling it, I was reading all the time, and I'm seeing here is based on democracy, social justice, equity, equality, non-racism and non-sexism, open society, accountability, rule of law, respect, reconciliation.
Right.
So my question is, thinking on our present curriculum in primary, secondary, tertiary, post-secondary education, don't we already touch on these areas, or am I not understanding something? In certain subjects, social studies, governance, health and family life, education, the topics that are mentioned here, you mentioned in Africa, I saw that online, it's actually a pedagogy they are using. So the theory that you mentioned, then Erdiston was training teachers, they would then have to incorporate that, how to teach it in class. So my question is, I just want to know your thoughts. If we are already, we have it in curriculums, if we don't, what are we lacking?
We have bits and pieces of it in how we deal with it. But we have still too much of the fuss that don't belong to us. We need to eradicate it. Otherwise, as we said, there's so many things, especially now, mental problems with our children. You know how many of us as adults have lost children by suicide and cannot work out the reasons why. There are things that I think if we put it down on paper and you started to look at what was offered in certain schools, things like that, you will still see that we still have too much of what is baggage. It's still too much baggage. And we need to do it from the very small, so that by the time they get to our ages, or they understand it, and it's not a matter of she's saying this thing and somebody else saying something else, and no. We need to have one consciousness, right? Good. One consciousness. This is what we are really aiming at. So there's no fight. There's no need to get into argument, pick up a big rock, because that's the first thing Bajans used to hit, a big rock, you know, to hit some person because somebody says something that they don't like. We have to learn how to deal with a lot of that. So I don't know, we have to wait and hear what is going to be coming out, because I'm one person. I could sow a little seed, but then somebody might decide and say, well, you don't want that. They might look too far ahead and see how good it might work for us. And they will put other things, stumbling blocks in your road. You wouldn't want to have to go to this university over there. You don't need to go to get a scholarship from over there. They will then be fighting for here. So I don't know what will happen after today pertaining to Ubuntu, but I found it was really a great way. I used that one. I found that last, you know. I found the one with Mezeru first. I said, well, still didn't hit me, it didn't touch me like Ubuntu. Maybe because, you know, already. I love things African. Although I went and I had a DNA thing done, they told me I had 36% out of Nigeria and 26% out of Ghana and 15% out of Benin. Well, I was dealing with this, so I didn't read anymore. I haven't looked at the rest. So I don't know what else they're going to be telling me. Yes. So thank you once again. If there are no more questions, I enjoy them. If anybody want to ask another, you should know how to find me. If you're from up here, you should be able to find me on email or so. Do that.
Thank you again, Dr. Jacobs. And it is really fitting that we not only have our chairperson here, Dr. Idemir Denny, but we also have a representative of the Ministry of Education in a key position to transform or to make recommendations for the transformation of our educational system, which is where we all start. So, Dr. Denny, there's a lot being placed on your shoulders today, and I'm sure that you will accept the challenge of contributing to the transformation of our education in our little island and beyond. And as we come to a close of our lecture, I'd like to invite Ms. Carrie-Ann Field from the Barbados Community College Library. She's a library assistant in the library, to move the vote of thanks. Thank you.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It is my honor to express gratitude to those whose efforts made today's lunchtime lecture possible. First of all, I wish to thank God for the opportunity for us to come together to witness this transference of knowledge. I wish to thank Canon Noel Burke for leading us in prayer. A hearty thank you is extended to Dr. Woodruff Holder, the acting registrar, for ably executing her duties as the master of ceremonies during today's proceedings. Your efforts are much appreciated. Thank you, Her Excellency, Ms. Fukushima, the Ambassador of Japan to Barbados, Mr. Preble, Acting Director of the CARICOM Single Market, for being here despite your hectic schedules. Next, I wish to thank Dr. Idemir Denny, Chairperson of the Board of Management of the BCC, providing us with a hearty welcome. Thanking also the Ambassador, Ms. Henry Martin, Advisor, Office of the Assistant Secretary General, and Coordinator of the Coordinating Offices for the offices and the units of the General Secretariat, who is joining us online from Washington. Thank you, Ms. Erica S. Watson from the Barbados Country Office of the Organization of American States, for partnering with the Barbados Community College to make this event a reality. We also wish to thank Ms. Jillian Husband, the college librarian, for providing us with an introduction to this event. I therefore wish to extend a heartfelt thank you to the lady of the hour, our featured speaker, Dr. Editha Nancy Jacobs, part-time tutor in the Division of Finance of the Community College. Listening to your presentation on this topic has been an immense pleasure and very insightful. You have educated and enlightened all attendees and challenged us to be mindful of the impact that slavery and its damaging effects has had on the educational systems in the Americas and the Caribbean as a whole. Thank you, Ms. Petra Emanuel, Tutor 2 in the Division of General Continuing Education, who designed the flyer and program. The Media Resource Department of the Ministry of Educational, Technical and Vocational Training, for providing the streaming services and our connection with Washington, as well as Ms. Hazel Burke and her team, whose flowers adorn the auditorium today. It would be remiss of me if I did not thank the members of maintenance MIS, and the Security Department for their assistance with this event. Thank you so much. To all heads of departments, divisions, and other staff members of BCC, specially invited guests, media personnel, students, ladies and gentlemen here in attendance. If there's anyone I have failed to mention specifically, please know your input was invaluable. To one and all, have a pleasant afternoon. Thank you.
That brings us to the close of this afternoon's proceedings, and I look forward to sharing many more of similar events with you. Thank you.